just mentioned that the president is going to attend the dignified transfer for these families. Given what Secretary Hegseth said this morning, is it the position of this administration that the press should not prominently cover the deaths of U.S. service members?
No, it's the position of this administration that the press in this room and the press across the country should accurately report on the success of Operation Epic Fury and the damage it is doing to the rogue Iranian regime that has threatened the lives of every single American in this room. If the Iranian regime had their choice, they would kill every single person in this room, and so we can all be very grateful.
So this is happening, guys. Imagine handing your worst enemy the exact weapon they need to destroy you, smiling for the cameras while you do it, and only realizing the catastrophic damage when the blade is already buried deep in your back. That is not a scene from a political thriller. That is exactly what just happened inside the Trump White House. And the fallout is so spectacular, so monumentally self-inflicted that legal analysts are literally struggling to find a historical comparison for this level of incompetence.
We've never had a Secretary of Defense who cares more.
Drones get through or tragic things happen. It's front page news. I get it. The press only wants to make the president look bad.
Yeah,
As you know, we cover the deaths of U.S. service members under every president.
The press does only want to make the president look bad.
The central figure in this disaster is Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, the one person whose entire professional existence is built on the premise of controlling the narrative. Her job is to refine the message, to clarify the administration's position, and to do so without handing ammunition to the opposition. Yet, in a moment of breathtaking miscalculation, she did not just misfire. She launched a targeted nuclear strike on her own legal team.
We have judges who are acting as partisan activists from the bench. They are trying to dictate policy from the President of the United States. They are trying to clearly slow walk this administration's agenda, and it's unacceptable. As the president said last night, we will continue to comply with these court orders. We will continue to fight these battles in courts, but it's incredibly apparent.
She went online, tapped out a few sentences on social media, and in doing so, handed a federal judge the smoking gun evidence required to potentially overturn a multi-billion-dollar executive order. We are talking about a judicial knife fight where she just voluntarily stabbed her own client in the chest and then complained about the sight of blood. The scene of the crime is a federal courtroom where a massive legal showdown is unfolding. A coalition of 23 state attorneys general has banded together to challenge one of the Trump administration's most aggressive power plays, a sweeping controversial freeze on federal grants. This is not pocket change we are discussing. This is billions upon billions of dollars in appropriated funds that Congress legally allocated.
And I just told you that the President of the United States will be attending their dignified transfer. So please,
That's not making the president look bad. That's showcasing that.
And we expect you to cover that as you should. We expect you to cover that as you should, Caitlin. But you and your network know that you take every single thing this administration says and tries to use it to make the president look bad.
When the administration slammed the brakes, the impact was instantaneous and brutal. States were not given a grace period or a warning. They were just cut off, left scrambling to figure out how to pay contractors, keep social workers employed, and stop critical community projects from collapsing into bankruptcy. The legal argument from the states was rock solid and constitutionally straightforward.
That there is a concerted effort by the far left to judge shop, to pick judges who are clearly acting as partisan activists from the bench in an attempt to derail this president's agenda. We will not allow that to happen. And not only are they usurping the will of the president and the chief executive of our country, but they are undermining the will of the American public, tens of millions of Americans who duly elected this president to implement the policies that are coming out of this White House.
Thinking she was being a fearless culture warrior, she decided to clarify things for the MAGA faithful. She could not bear the thought of the base thinking they were backing down, so she fired off a post on X, essentially screaming from the digital rooftops, "Do not believe the hype." This is not a cancellation of the federal funding freeze. We are simply playing a shell game. The freeze remains in full effect and will be brutally enforced regardless of what paperwork we just pulled back. She might as well have walked into the courtroom, slapped the gavel out of the judge's hand, and screamed, "We are lying to your face." Judge McConnell saw the post. Of course he saw it. Federal judges do not live under rocks. They have clerks. They watch the news, and they absolutely monitor the public statements of the litigants standing before them.
And it's very, very clear that this is an activist judge who is trying to usurp the president's authority. Under the Alien Enemies Act, the president has this power, and that's why this deportation campaign has continued. And this judge, Judge Boasberg, is a Democrat activist. He was appointed by Barack Obama. His wife has donated more than $10,000 to Democrats, and he has consistently shown his disdain for this president and his policies, and it's unacceptable.
When the judge read those words, the legal calculus instantly evaporated. He looked at the administration's official spokesperson admitting in black and white that the reversal was a sham. The judge essentially concluded, "So you are feeding me a scripted fiction in my courtroom, while your official spokesperson is telling the entire world that you intend to ignore the law." That is the textbook definition of bad faith. This was not a minor slip of the tongue. It was the complete obliteration of the administration's credibility. The judge directly cited Leavitt's social media post as the primary justification for why he now had to intervene with judicial force. He pointed out that her statement revealed a distinction without a difference, a devastating legal conclusion that translates to, "You use different words, but the intent remains the same." The administration was not complying. They were just going underground. They were trying to pull a fast one on the Constitution, and Leavitt had just broadcast the map of their secret tunnel. The judge made it crystal clear that because of her reckless posting, the court could no longer take the administration at its word. The mask had slipped, and now the iron fist of the judiciary had to come down to protect the rule of law. The instant the gravity of what she had done landed, Leavitt reportedly spiraled into absolute fury. The eruption was legendary. She did not react with the quiet shame of a professional who knows they have stepped in it. She raged. According to reports coming out of the West Wing, she is blaming everyone on planet Earth except the person who typed the words and hit send. She is pointing fingers at the judge, accusing him of playing politics and twisting her words. She is raging at the media, criticizing them for doing their job and reporting on the words that came out of her mouth. She is lashing out at the 23 state attorneys general as if it is their fault she confessed to the crime in public. This is not just anger, it is a psychological refusal to accept accountability. She is standing in the smoking crater of a policy that cost billions, clutching the detonator and screaming sabotage at the sky. The practical damage here is absolutely staggering. Because of the bad faith evidence she provided, the judge is now not just leaning toward a restraining order, he is practically sprinting toward the most restrictive version of it. The administration is facing a court mandate that will force them to immediately release every single frozen penny. Billions of dollars that Trump wanted to control will now be flushed back into the system under the watchful eye of a furious judge. And it gets worse for the executive branch. Because the judge now views them as deceptive actors, he is not just going to order the money released and walk away. He is likely to establish a strict monitoring regime. He might demand regular reports, audits, and sworn affidavits to prove they are not running the same stunt through a different department. If they so much as slow walk a single transaction now, they are facing contempt of court charges, potential crippling fines, and a constitutional crisis that makes this look like a parking ticket. Trump's legal team is reportedly shell-shocked. They are trapped in a waking nightmare where their professional reputations are being torched by a press secretary who does not understand litigation 101. In the legal world, your credibility is your currency. You spend years, sometimes decades, building a reputation with the judiciary so that when you stand up and say, "Trust me, Judge," the judge actually does. Leavitt just declared bankruptcy on that trust. She handed every judge in the country a precedent to look at the Department of Justice, squint their eyes suspiciously and ask, "Are you pulling a Leavitt on me? Are your public statements contradicting your legal briefs?" In one social media post, she managed to poison the well for every single ongoing case the Trump administration is fighting. That is not an exaggeration. That is the cascading effect of losing the benefit of the doubt in federal court. The legal strategy was so simple that a first-year law student could sketch it on a napkin. When you are sued and you are losing, you show voluntary cessation. You stop doing the bad thing. You tell the judge, "Look, we stopped, so there is no need for you to rule." And you hope the judge drops the case. The administration technically did step one by pulling the memo. But to win the game, you have to actually stop. You cannot have your spokesperson screaming from the rooftops that you are just using a cheat code. That is like a bank robber telling the teller that he is putting the gun down, but his getaway driver is outside holding a sign that says, "We are still robbing the bank, just reloading." The judge instantly recognized the scheme for what it was. Diving deeper into the psychology of this disaster, it is clear this happened because of a fundamental disconnect between the political operation and the legal team. Leavitt was not thinking like a defendant. She was thinking like a pundit. She wanted to look unyielding to the resistance. She wanted to own the opposition. She wanted to prove that withdrawing a piece of paper did not mean the deep state was winning. In the world of social media, that makes sense. In the world of federal litigation, it is suicide. She prioritized maintaining the aura of strength over the reality of legal survival. She forgot that the judge was not a follower she needed to impress. He was the man with the power to dismantle the entire policy. Her post was essentially a confession of executive overreach, signed, sealed, and delivered directly to the plaintiff's table. The coalition of 23 state attorneys general could not believe their luck. In a massive multi-state lawsuit, the hardest thing to prove is often intent. You can show the action. You can show the damage, but proving a defendant is acting in bad faith usually requires subpoenas, long discovery battles, and piecing together internal emails. Leavitt saved them the trouble. The state legal teams are probably still celebrating in their conference rooms. They did not have to dig for a smoking gun. The administration's top spokesperson walked into the town square, fired it into the air, and then handed the shell casing to the judge. Every single argument the states were making about the executive branch being a lawless, reckless actor was validated by the defendant's own words. Think about the specificity of the judge's logic here. He said Leavitt's words created a distinction without a difference. That phrase is going to haunt the administration's appeals process. You cannot easily appeal a finding of fact that comes from your own mouth. The appellate courts are going to look at this, read Leavitt's post, read the transcript of the administration trying to tell the lower court they were complying, and the disconnect will be fatal. They will see the attempt to game the system. This is not a close call legal question anymore. This is a clean, undeniable record of misconduct. The administration's appeal is effectively dead on arrival because the factual record is contaminated by their own arrogance. The infrastructure of the funding freeze itself is fascinating because it touches everything. We do not just mean theoretical government waste, we mean concrete projects that voters see every day. When the freeze hit, and then when it was secretly continued according to Leavitt, road construction stopped. Daycare centers that rely on federal block grants had to send letters home to parents saying they might close. Medical research labs lost their funding streams overnight. Veterans programs were put in limbo. This is not a Washington parlor game. This is life-impacting governance. And Leavitt's attempt to secretly keep that freeze alive, exposed by her own post, reveals a stunning disregard for those consequences in favor of a political power play. The judge saw that arrogant disregard, and it is directly fueling the severity of his coming order. The irony is painful for anyone who understands crisis communications. The whole purpose of a press secretary is to protect the principal from disaster. They are supposed to be the firewall, the human shield who takes the hits without adding gasoline to the fire. Leavitt set the fire, locked the door, and then yelled at the fire department for showing up. Her job is message discipline. Yet she was so undisciplined that she contradicted the official filing and the attorney of record. Why the legal team did not restrict her social media access is a question for the internal review. You can be absolutely certain that right now, other members of the administration's communications team are having their social media privileges revoked, forced to funnel every public statement through a layer of legal review that should have been there in the first place. When the restraining order lands, and it will land with the force of a sledgehammer, the Trump administration will have to unfreeze the assets immediately. But the judge's concerns do not stop at just releasing the funds. Because of the bad faith that now clings to the case, the order will likely impose proactive compliance measures. This means the administration might have to file weekly reports with the court proving every dollar intended for California's highways, New York schools, or Texas healthcare systems actually arrived. They have turned themselves into probationers in their own government. They will have a court-imposed obligation around their neck, and every reminder will be a consequence of the fact that their press secretary could not exercise restraint. The micromanagement of this defeat is going to be humiliating and time-consuming, tying up resources just to prove they are not cheating again. Politically, this is a gift-wrapped tactical win for the Democrats. They do not even have to spin the narrative. They can just hold up the judge's ruling, quote Leavitt's post, and say, "We told you they were lawless," and they admitted it. It feeds a powerful storyline for the 2026 midterms and beyond, painting the administration as a group of chaotic amateurs who trip over their own feet in their rush to break the law. It is not a narrative,